We're just flooded with information these days, aren't we? Social media, news, it's constant.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
So how do we, navigate all that? How do we evaluate it? And maybe even more importantly, how do we make sure our own thinking is sound, that it's not biased?
That's the core question, really.
Well, today we're diving deep into a really foundational work on this. It's Critical Thinking, Tools for Taking Charge of Your Learning and Your Life by Richard Paul and Linda Elder.
A classic in the field.
Right. And our mission here is to pull out the key insights. What is critical thinking, according to them? Why is it so crucial, especially now? And, how can you actually do it better? How can you cultivate it to make better decisions?
Well, Paul and Elder offer this incredibly systematic framework. It's really detailed.
Systematic, okay.
Yeah, and their starting point is pretty profound. They basically say that most of our thinking, when we don't examine it, it's often biased, distorted, maybe just plain ineffective. So they see critical thinking not just as like a skill, but really as the art of analyzing and evaluating thinking with a view to improving it. It's about actively managing your own mind.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
Active control. Okay, so this book, the first edition was 2001, right? Updated through 2021. Why is it still so relevant? Maybe even more relevant now?
Well, it's almost like they saw today coming. They talk about accelerating technology, the information explosion, global complexity, all the things we're grappling with.
Yeah, definitely feeling that.
And they argue that our sort of traditional ways of learning, like just memorizing stuff or solving problems, they're often just inadequate.
Not enough.
Not enough. So they call for thinkers who are more complex, more adaptable, and more sensitive to divergent points of view, which naturally leads to the question, okay, if the old way isn't cutting it, what kind of thinking should we be aiming for?
Right. And that brings us to something really interesting they talk about early on. Weak sense versus strong sense critical thinking. What's the difference there? Why does that matter for us?
It's a crucial distinction. Weak sense is basically using reasoning skills, maybe very skillfully, but mainly to defend what you already believe.
Okay.
Or to advance your own interests. You might be great at arguing, maybe even using some intellectual tricks, but the goal isn't necessarily truth, it's winning. Or self-justification.
I think we've all seen that.
We probably all do it sometimes. But strong sense critical thinking, that's different. It requires fair-mindedness. It requires intellectual humility. It's about genuinely wanting to understand the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it goes against your own interests or beliefs.
That sounds much harder.
It is much harder. It often means arguing against yourself, essentially, challenging your own biases head on.
Okay, so if strong sense is the goal, this higher bar, how do we get there? It sounds less like just learning a technique and more like, developing certain qualities.
You nailed it. It's about cultivating what they call intellectual virtues. There are 7 key ones.
7 virtues.
Yeah. And maybe we can touch on a couple that really stand out, like intellectual humility. That's not just saying, I don't know. It's actively recognizing the limits of your knowledge, being aware of your own potential for self-deception, being genuinely open to being wrong.
Actively looking for your blind spots.
Exactly. And then there's intellectual empathy. This one's really tough, especially today. It's the ability to genuinely accurately reconstruct the viewpoints and reasoning of people you disagree with.
To actually understand where they're coming from, even if you think they're wrong.
Precisely. To see it from their perspective, not just caricaturing it so you can easily knock it down. It's vital for any kind of productive conversation.
That takes real effort.
Immense effort. And then there's intellectual courage, challenging popular beliefs. Integrity, holding yourself to the same standards. Perseverance, sticking with complex problems. Confidence in reason, trusting the process. And autonomy, thinking for yourself. They all kind of work together.
Wow. Okay. It really does sound like a journey, not something you just achieve overnight. And Paul and Elder, they actually lay out stages for this development, right?
They do, a 6-stage model. And they suggest, maybe a bit pessimistically, that most people start as unreflective thinkers. Meaning basically running on autopilot. Not really aware of how much our thinking, or lack thereof, shapes our experiences and decisions.
Okay.
The first step up is becoming a challenged thinker. That's when you start to realize, Maybe some of my problems are actually thinking problems. You recognize there's an issue, but you don't really have a system to fix it yet.
That sounds like a common place to be.
Very common. Then you might become a beginning thinker where you start actively trying to improve, maybe catching yourself making assumptions, but it's still kind of hit or miss.
Getting started.
Right. The real shift happens when you become a practicing thinker. That means developing regular habits of self-assessment, consciously using intellectual standards, really working at it.
That sounds like where the commitment really kicks in.
Absolutely. Paul and Elder emphasize that moving up these stages requires sustained effort and commitment. It doesn't just happen. Beyond that, you have the advanced thinker and the ultimate goal, the master thinker, who embodies these skills and virtues consistently.
Okay, so it's a path. If we're trying to walk that path, what are the actual tools they give us? You mentioned a framework earlier.
Right. They give us two main sets of tools. First, the 8 elements of reasoning. These are like the fundamental building blocks present in all thinking, whether you're aware of them or not.
Okay, like what?
Well, every time you think, you have a purpose, right? A goal. You're trying to figure something out, which means there's a question at issue. You're using information, data, facts, experiences.
Makes sense.
You're making interpretations and drawing inferences or conclusions. You're using concepts, ideas, or theories. Crucially, you're always making assumptions, things you take for granted.
Often without realizing it.
Exactly. Unstated beliefs. And your thinking always happens from a specific point of view, a frame of reference. And finally, it leads to implications and consequences. Those are the 8 elements. Always there.
Okay, so that's how you dissect thinking. But how do you judge if it's good thinking?
That's where the second set of tools comes in. The 9 intellectual standards. These are the criteria you use to evaluate the elements.
The benchmarks.
Precisely. Things like clarity, is the thinking understandable? Accuracy, is it true? Free from error? Precision, is it specific enough? Detailed.
Those seem pretty straightforward.
They do, but applying them rigorously isn't always easy. Then there are others, like relevance, does it actually bear on the question? Depth, does it grapple with the complexities, or is it superficial?
Ah, okay. Deeper cuts.
Exactly. Breadth, have you considered other relevant viewpoints? Different perspectives? Logic, does it make sense? Do the conclusions follow from the evidence? Significance, are you focusing on what's most important? And finally, fairness, are you considering all relevant viewpoints without bias, especially the ones you disagree with?
Fairness, again, connecting back to that strong sense thinking.
Absolutely. Using these standards to assess the elements, that's the core practice of critical thinking, according to Paul and Elder. Asking yourself, is my purpose clear? Is my information accurate? Are my assumptions justified? Is my reasoning logical and fair?
That feels very concrete. So how does this apply beyond just analyzing an argument, like in everyday life, making big decisions?
Oh, hugely. They talk about applying this to understand your own life. For instance, the idea of reading backward from your current situation.
Reading backward.
Yeah, looking at where you are now, maybe a problem you're facing, and analyzing the past, thinking, the decisions, the assumptions that led you here. It's a powerful way to learn from experience and avoid repeating mistakes.
Deconstructing your own path.
Exactly. They also talk about understanding the dual logic of experience. That means recognizing how much of your perspective comes from your own direct experience and reasoning versus how much is shaped often unconsciously by your culture, by media, by social groups.
Separating your own thoughts from the noise.
Kind of, yeah. Becoming aware of those influences so you can evaluate them critically rather than just accepting them.
It sounds like a lot of the work is internal, like fighting against our own tendencies.
Hmm.
What do Paul and Elder see as the biggest roadblocks?
They focus on 2 huge ones, egocentrism and sociocentrism.
Okay, define those.
Egocentrism is basically the natural human tendency to see everything in relation to oneself. It leads to self-serving bias, where we unconsciously favor beliefs that benefit us or make us feel good.
Right.
They even describe specific patterns, like egocentric hypocrisy, holding others to standards you don't meet yourself, or egocentric blindness, not seeing facts that contradict your desired view. It's deeply ingrained.
I can see that. And sociocentrism.
That's similar, but at the group level. It's the assumption that your social group plane, your nation, your culture, your political party, whatever, is inherently superior.
Groupthink, tribalism.
Exactly. It leads to uncritically accepting group norms, demonizing outsiders, and resisting information that challenges the group's beliefs. Paul and Elder argue that recognizing these tendencies in ourselves and others is absolutely fundamental. You can't become a rational thinker without confronting them.
Constant vigilance required.
Pretty much, yeah.
So this focus on bias and fairness obviously touches on ethics. How do they connect critical thinking to making ethical choices? Because often ethics feels like it comes from somewhere else, religion, law, feelings.
Right, and they tackle that directly. They argue that true ethical reasoning has to be grounded in principles concerned with human well-being, principles that are ideally universal.
Universal, so not just based on one group's rules.
Exactly. They distinguish genuine ethical reasoning from just following religious dogma or obeying the law, which can sometimes be unethical, or conforming to social conventions. The key is applying critical thinking standards like fairness, logic, considering consequences to ethical dilemmas.
But how do egocentrism and sociocentrism mess that up?
Well, they're huge obstacles. Egocentrism makes us rationalize unethical actions if they benefit us. Sociocentrism makes us justify harming outsiders or blindly follow unethical group norms. So, strong sense critical thinking, with its emphasis on empathy and fairness, is essential for overcoming those biases and reasoning ethically. It forces you to consider the welfare of others, not just yourself or your group.
Okay, so it's deeply tied to ethical development. It feels like this whole framework is pushing beyond just personal improvement. Are they suggesting a wider impact, like for society?
Oh, absolutely. That's a central theme. They have this idea of transformation of thinking as life transformation, and that famous quote, "You are what you think."
Powerful.
Whatever you are doing, whatever you feel, whatever you want, all are determined by the quality of your thinking. And they scale this up. They argue these critical thinking principles are universal. They apply everywhere, in any field, any culture.
So it's not just a Western thing.
Not at all. The elements and standards are part of human reasoning itself. And societally, they make a stark point. Many unexamined lives together result in an uncritical, unjust, dangerous world.
Wow, that's a heavy statement.
It is. They see critical thinking as vital for democracy. Citizens need it to resist media manipulation, political propaganda. They call for major educational reform, shifting focus from just absorbing facts to actively developing thinking skills.
From passive to active learning.
Precisely. And globally, they argue intellectual empathy and fair-mindedness are crucial for understanding different cultures, for being effective global citizens. It's really about elevating the quality of human thought across the board.
And they stress it's an ongoing thing, right? A
Yeah.
lifelong journey.
Yeah, definitely not a destination you just arrive at. It's continuous development. They even look back to Socrates, his method of constant questioning, his intellectual humility. They see that as the ancient root of this practice.
So the Socratic method is part of this lineage.
Very much so. And they believe this continuous refinement of thinking isn't just good for individuals or society in a philosophical sense, it also drives practical success. Better problem solving, better innovation, better professional effectiveness. It gives you an edge.
Okay, so it's a really comprehensive framework. How has it been received over the years? What's its legacy been?
It's had a massive impact, especially in education.
Really?
Yeah, huge. Thousands of colleges and universities worldwide have adopted or been influenced by the Paul Elder model in designing courses and curriculum, particularly for critical thinking requirements.
So it shaped how critical thinking is taught.
Definitely. And it's also widely used in corporate training, professional development workshops, basically anywhere that good thinking is valued. It's also provided a solid foundation for academic research into critical thinking, giving researchers clear concepts to work with.
And outside academia.
It's influenced broader conversations about, civil discourse, media literacy, the kind of reasoning we need in public life. Now, some people find it maybe a bit overwhelming at first because it is so detailed.
Yeah, a lot of elements and standards.
Right, but overall, its practicality and theoretical grounding are really widely respected. It gives people concrete steps they can take.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for someone listening? What does this Paul Elder framework offer you?
I think the main thing is that it provides a really robust, practical, actionable system. It's not just abstract theory. It gives you concrete tools, the elements, the standards that you can apply to literally any situation where thinking is required.
Personal life, work, understanding the world.
All of it. It's a way to take conscious charge of the quality of your own mind.
Okay, so a final thought for everyone listening to mull over. Thinking about those intellectual virtues Paul and Elder described, humility, empathy, courage, perseverance, and so on, which one do you feel you already practice pretty well? And, maybe more interestingly, which one feels like the biggest challenge for you right now, but maybe offers the biggest reward if you could develop it further?